bringing it up. Right on, my sister. Appreciate the work we're doing together. This is the beauty of this kind of work. You come in as strangers and you leave out as friends. The title speaks for itself, and I will sort of shape the title as I go through my sermon today. Basically, I'm hearing in my head, even as I am taking part in this service, Bach's Credo from the Mass in B minor. And those of you who are familiar with that great piece, how that Credo Unum, it sort of just swirls through your brain if you listen to it. And I admire the fact that your slogan, as it were, speaks of deeds, but not creeds. But right at the present time, we're gonna have to move to a higher level because we are in a struggle between the advocates of the 8th principle, which they hope will negate the 7 principles, and those who are committed to the 7 principles, and we will seek to absorb what is true in the 8th principle, but negate what is not true. Those things based on fallacies and falsehoods we will reject, and those things based on truths we will accept. We all are committed at some point in human history to dismantling racism. We consider that our point of unity. I further assert that it is a time under this concept of seeing our 7 principles as a credo, I believe, versus a creed, you must believe, as vital. It's time to make a stand against the mystification of the great historical and theological traditions of Unitarian Universalism, rooted in historical theism on the one hand and social humanism on the other. I would like to dedicate this sermon to Sister Marie Cobbs, my Black sister, and of similar age and historical experiences, both coming up through the Black Power movement, socialist, communist movements, etc. And also to Brother Evan Freund, who is not here, a white man, a Black woman and a white man. And my wife, Bobby Lammers Campbell, who, and she will be surprised to know this, I identify as having mixed ancestry, being a result of a Protestant and a Catholic coming together. All of us have one thing in common. We believe that the 7 principles, AKA the Magnificent 7, constitute the ground of being of our evolutionary faith and of our association of congregations. This sermon, by the way, when I was an acceptable member of the religious order, now called the UUMA, won first prize at the Central Midwest District Sermon Contest in 2011. There might be an old video floating around that some of you may have seen. All right, now we're ready. Let me begin with a kind of a parable. And Sister Moore, you keep track of me, your Hattie's Baptists are, they may be Unitarian Universalists, but they do have that older tradition. So don't let me go on too long. A parable. And I like to present it quickly and yet completely. Sometime back in June 2010, 4 delegates set out from the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations General Assembly meeting in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Some of you may have been there. We were a Black man and a white man, a Black woman and a white woman driving down I-94. They discussed a variety of things, especially issues of racism, shared personal information, talked about church activities. At the Dells in Wisconsin, they stopped for a carry-out lunch, mingling with the predominantly white group of folks, but sprinkled here and there with a few Black folks. Then continued driving through the beautiful northern Wisconsin landscape, stopping from time to time at rest stops, then crossing the St. Croix River into Minnesota, arriving safe and sound in readiness for the first night of the General Assembly, the March of the Manners. This then is the parable of this morning's service. What you don't note in this parable, there is no signs of systemic racism. There is no sign of implicit bias. And there is no sign of the mysterious white supremacy culture. What I want to argue today is that serious Unitarian Universalists come up with a common understanding of our faith, our beliefs, our whatever, call it what you will, a Unitarian Universalist theology based on our 7 principles and our sources. And by the way, one of our UMUAC members pronounced UMIAC. One of our UMIAC members, Craig Morrow, it will be adding, making a proposal to add a 3rd source to our Judeo-Christian sources, Judeo-Christian Islamic sources, and Michael Servetus would definitely agree with that process. What's the thesis? My thesis is, and I don't want to be rude and crude, but my thesis is we no longer need coffee hour Unitarian Universalists. I love to see them as they sort of endure the church service, endure the music, endure the meditation, but they look forward to their true religious experience, UU communion, having coffee, good donuts, cookies, nice celery, talking with their friends, chit-chatting. I call them the coffee hour UU. Their time must now fade away, and we need some people grounded, hardcore into the stone, the rock of the 7 principles, personally embodied, because you say, yes, this is the way to live. And to my creeds and deeds people, I love you, our deeds people, you did a great job, but guess what happened? Every good deed that a white UU said they were committed to is now seen as a part of white supremacy culture. Whatever good deeds you did and are doing down here at Columbia, South Carolina, according to the spectrum of white supremacy created by Afrocentric neo-racists, it's just a form of white supremacy. So you might as well say, okay, we're gonna ground our deeds on these 7 principles. Now, let me be clear about the difference between a credo and a creed. Lenin argued that you cannot have a revolutionary party based on autocracy, like some of the revolutionary groups in Russia were arguing. You had to have autocracy. He said, no, this has to be a voluntary association of revolutionary people committed to the ideologies of Marxism. To come together and debate and argue and come up with a plan that even if you disagree with the plan, you will go along with it. But first there had to be debate and argument. That was the democratic part. And then everybody had to agree to carry it out to prove it was right or wrong. That was a centralist part. He called it democratic centralism. Well, we're not Leninists here in this room. I'm a Leninist of some sort. We are Unitarian Universalists. For us, when I use this word credo, that's why I reject the creed. It's a I believe. This I believe. This I want to believe. And we can go a little further. This I need to believe. Because the world we are faced with, and I'm sure you love Biden and you love Harris and you love Pelosi and you know the 4 young women who are sort of the spark plug for struggle. And we love the fact we got Juneteenth. There's a time of turmoil coming because of this issue of race. South Carolina knew about it in the 70s. There was actually a second civil war fought in South Carolina during the second Reconstruction. My research is on that. South Carolina was a contentious area for a very long time in trying to determine the future. And those who believed fully in the Reconstruction principles, even though they were physically defeated, they remained in the underground waiting for the right time to come back. Because so a credo is an embodiment of a belief system which allows you, whatever you did in the 50s and 60s during the civil rights movement, I hope you'll share that with me in our talk back, it allows you to stand firm like a tree. That's what? Planted by the waters. You will not be moved by somebody accusing you of being implicit racist, systemic racism all over the place like a fungus gone wild. Credo, this we believe, 7 principles. Now, we've been discussing in UMEAC the 7 principles for the past several months. We've had all kinds of discussion. And I just want to walk you through it. And I don't want to take up too much of our time because I want to go to a deeper issue. The first one is the big one. It gets us started. We start with who we are. We start with the fact that we have come out of these living traditions. We start with what has allowed us to emerge and to be a power. Really, if you were to think about it, our principles go back as far as Neolithic communism. This is not something we just sort of invented out of nowhere. For millennia of human development, from the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic periods of communism, because that's what it was back then. There was no money to determine your worth and dignity. People just taking care of each other. We lost it. It's called the loss of the Garden of Eden. That's another story. But the idea of inherent worth and dignity is rooted in the fact that everybody in the tribe had worth because everybody in the tribe worked. The little kids worked, the old people worked. A Neolithic commune was an incredible place. And there was dignity for everybody because everybody was taking part in making the thing work. Issues like justice, equity, and compassion, by the way, let me be honest with you, I have only recently grasped the second principle. I'm a first, fourth, and seventh principle person myself. That's me, basically. I like the inherent worth and dignity in the fight against racism. That's why I'm not blindsided by calling Pot Moore a secret white supremacist. I just look at them like they're crazy. I'm the fourth principle person because I believe in the responsible search for truth and meaning. And there's so much irresponsible falsehoods going on out here about the issue of race. And I'm a seventh principle person because of that interdependence. I got children in Europe, and I got children in the United States, and I got who God knows what I might have when I was a young man doing what I was doing when I was a young man. Second principle was new to me. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And sometimes I must confess to you, my brothers and sisters and cousins, I have not always had good personal and human relations. I've been a little bit arrogant, self-centered, and the worst part, thinking I was doing the right thing. So that brought to my attention this idea. You need justice, you need it combined with equity, but it has to be leavened with compassion. And if you hear the language of the opposition, there's very little compassion. There's a bitterness and an anger, almost a hatred that has its roots in God knows where in their mentality. And that big one, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Spiritual growth. I mean, that's a complicated one. Spiritual growth. When is the last time you said in coffee hour, said, how's your spiritual growth going? Anna, how's it doing? Phil, how's your spiritual growth developing? Spiritual growth basically means breathing. That's the original word, spiritus, to breathe. Maybe we need to figure out how to do more deep breathing. I'm hearing all kinds of things about how breathing is a part of our health system. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. That's hard. That's hard. What is responsible? One person's responsible is another person's irresponsible. I certainly have been accused often of being extremely irresponsible in my search for truth and meaning. because as one person accused me, an African-American woman accused me to my face and to her friends that people didn't listen to me because I was this big black man with a big bad voice. I thought that was pretty cool, but it certainly indicated that somehow she saw that my blackness and my big voice as an aspect of irresponsibility. And therefore she helped to close down my class because she felt it was an irresponsible class because of my vocal cords and my racial color. Another big one is the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Oh, that's a powerful tension. You got right of conscience over here, and you got democratic process over here. And sometimes the democratic process will go this way, but your conscience takes you that way. Those Unitarian Universalist churches during the period of segregation that had to make choices, we're already considered to be weird people. We're already heretics in the midst of fundamentalist Christians. And now we got to make decisions on how we're going to negotiate the race issue. And sometimes the democratic process is just too dangerous. We just can't let you join our church publicly. You can join our church privately. Or maybe the conscience thing was primary. No, conscience prevents us from going along with this segregated world, back and forth. And it's never fully resolved. It is a process, always a process, conscience, democratic process. Some people like Alan Lendrup left our church, a church he had helped to build, helped to work with, because conscience was primary over the democratic process when they unfairly voted to cancel my Nature of Racism class as a mandate from the UUMA to get rid of that Campbellian class. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. To be blunt, as a Marxist Leninist historical theist, Unitarian Universalist Baptist, that will never happen until we eliminate money as the basis of human experience. And until that happens, that's one of those great aspirations that still should motivate us to support the peace movement, to point out when our country is committing acts of evil, to tell our Israeli and Palestinian brothers and sisters, you will never have peace so long as you have two nations. You must have one Israeli-Palestinian nation. Oh my goodness. Nobody wants to hear that, but we have to say it. The one-state solution. Peace. And I will not go into the long, here comes Lenin to the rescue. We live in an age of imperialism. And then we also live in an area of the Old Testament which says, woe to you who cry peace when there is no peace. Tension. But we want it. Peace, we want it. Liberty, and we want it. Justice. That's another one of those words. I mean, we could spend generation after generation explicating these principles, just like our brothers and sisters in the theistic tradition spend generation after generation explicating the Torah or the Quran or the Christian Bible. And last but not least, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Can you explain to me how you can believe in interdependence and have racially segregated meetings? Can somebody enlighten my 87-year-old brain to how you can have interdependence with something called a harbor for Black people over there and a haven for Black people over there? And oh, by the way, you white folks, you do the best you can. But then, as Miss Angelo has pointed out, y'all so fragile. Y'all are so fragile. How can you have interdependent relations? You need to somehow just do the best you can in corners that we shall set up for you. It all sounds like Jim Crow to me. It all sounds like a neo-racism of some sort. Let me sum up then. I hope that my thesis is clear. that our 7 principles now must cease to be. Reverend Nina and I had an argument about this, by the way, many years ago. She said the covenant with the 7 principles was a fight between congregations. It was never, quote, intended to be for the individual members of the church, because it's too much like, you know, creedal stuff. And you know, people sign the book and get the rolls. Sign the book, and then you get your rolls and your Unitarian Universalist and enjoy the coffee. But I have come to the conclusion that while she is right historically, existentially, we have now reached a political point where these 7 principles must be the guiding light of our work, at least in UMIAC. I'm not speaking for anybody else but UMIAC. You can't join us unless you accept these principles. That's this way we have to do this in order to sort of make it clear where we stand. And here I would argue John Calvin comes to the rescue. So what's the deal? At this time of crisis, with its outrage of racism in old and new forms, we're going to Milwaukee on Monday. Me and Alan Lindrup, black guy, white guy, going to Milwaukee to have a press conference where we should have had our GA 2021. And I don't hear all debates about, oh, COVID. I don't hear any of that. All I'm going to say, going to Milwaukee on Monday, June 21st, to have a press conference to announce the UMIAC Democratic Multiracial Unity Manifesto. We're going there at a time when Juneteenth is behind us and people are already attacking it, including some of the neo-racist Afrocentricists who are saying, it's not enough, it's not enough. It's never enough of those kind of people, by the way. It is urgent that we begin to accept our 7 principles as presently constituted with the addition of our new source as a credo. I believe as an act of personal commitment. As we deal with the problems of growing our churches, expanding our denomination, and most of all, having an impact on the historical times in which we live. Brothers and sisters, the Americanization of Unitarian Universalism is now about to come to an end. And internationalism is now emerging. And in this process, I cry credo, this I believe. What about you? What do you believe really? Amen. Choices.